Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here, welcome back to the railway and welcome to another review. Today I'm looking at a pre-grouping tank engine from Bachmann. I've always been very interested in the wheel arrangement of steam locomotives, and I particularly enjoy wheel arrangements that are unusual or even unique. Well, today's locomotive certainly has an unusual wheel arrangement, and at least in my collection, I believe it is also unique. So the loco is this. It is the L&YR Class 5 by Bachmann. And this is a pre-grouping tank engine which originated from the Lancashire and Yorkshire Railway here in England. And looking through the front of the box, you might be able to tell that the wheel arrangement of this loco is 2-4-2. The 4, of course, referring to the 4 driving wheels in the centre of the loco, and then the 2s at either end refer to the 2 pairs of non-driven wheels at either end of the loco, which really makes this loco look beautifully even and balanced, doesn't it? And yes, I believe there is no other class of loco in my collection that shares this wheel configuration, which is really saying something, isn't it? There are hundreds of locos in this room. None of them are 242s except for the L&YR Class 5. Well, that's like gold dust for me. In terms of price, it's a little bit difficult to say what the RRP for this particular version of the model is here in the BR Black, because the only version of this model currently listed on Bachmann's website is the Crimson Lake version, and sometimes Bachmann do charge more for the more sort of flowery liveries. So it's possible that this would be a little bit less than the £149.95 listed on Bachmann's website, so just take that with a pinch of salt. This one though I got a great deal on. This came from Model Railways Direct and it cost me just £97.96. Less than £100, I always say, for any locomotive these days is really quite impressive. And I have to say though, I'm not usually a fan of BR Black liveries. This one looks absolutely gorgeous because of all the lining on it. So I can't wait to see what this is like. It's a very unusual locomotive, unusual wheel configuration, and a great price. Let's find out what it's like. Now, this is not the first L&YR Class 5 that I've owned. I do actually have another of these in the sort of original Lancashire and Yorkshire livery. You probably saw it behind me a second ago. But I've had that model for years, and that livery is all I've ever known of this model. Until today, of course, where I'm going to be trying the BR Black one. And I've said before that a change in livery can utterly transform a locomotive. And looking through the front of the box of this model, I think that's happened already. It looks totally different. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what this one is like, and also seeing what sort of tooling variations Bachmann have cooked up between this one in the later BR livery and the old version. So really looking forward to this one. Let me show you the end of the box then. So the version of the model I have here is 31-170. It is the L&YR 242 tank number 50764, and it is in the British Railways lined black. Can't wait to see that. And if you want to chip this with DCC, you need a 6-pin DCC decoder. And let me show you the back of the box, because here is a brief history of the tanks in real life. If you'd like to pause and read this little blurb, do feel free to. For now though, I can't believe how excited I am about this, given that I've already looked at one of these in the past, but that's not been for years, and like I say, this one looks completely different. So let's pull it out. There it is. You can see what a small tank engine this is. Yeah. Not as small as some, obviously, but it's reasonably small and cute. It's about the size of an 044 tank engine, and this was sort of meant to be an alternative to the 044 tanks. So I suppose it makes sense that it's a similar sort of size. All right, so let's have a look at the paperwork. And so here we have the exploded diagram, which doesn't go into very much detail in terms of the loco body and such, but but it does show you the mechanism. We've got the motor in there, not sure if it's a 3 or a 5 pole, and then you've got the wheel set, of course. Can't remember whether this has proper bearings on it or not, so we'll have to see. And then down at the bottom, you can see we've got some of the accessories here, screw couplings. Well, that's really nice to see. I love that feature. And the vacuum pipe as well. We'll have a look at the accessories bag in just a second. A little bit about the loco body shell removal on this end. It's just a few screws, as you can see, nice and easy. And then you've got some sort of general information, running in curves, DCC decoder fitting, lubrication. That's pretty much the same for every Bachmann loco. Right, so that's the paperwork out the way, I would say. With that, let's pull this out and take our first proper look at it. The accessories pack, you'll be pleased to see, does not seem to contain too much, which means it will be quick to look at, and it also means that most of the detail is fitted to the loco at the factory. And sure enough, yeah, we've only got the screw link couplings in here. We don't even have a vacuum pipe, that's pre-fitted as well. So very, very easy. The only reason these couplings won't be fitted at the factory is that they would interfere with the NEM couplings already fitted to the loco. So yeah, that's completely fine, makes the most sense. It's quite convenient even. Right, let's have a look at the finish there. Now, BR Black, quite plain, but I'm really looking forward to seeing the finish and of course the lining. Here we go. Ooh. You can't see my face, but it is grinning. Look at that. Yeah, beautiful, slightly shiny boiler there. The lining already looks gorgeous. Yeah, what a beautiful loco. I don't even like BR Black locos that much, but this one is just so smart. How wonderful. Right, how heavy is it? Let's lift it up. Yeah, it's unbelievably heavy, actually. And I've owned one of these before. I can't believe how heavy this feels. Is the old one this heavy? I will have to get it on the scales and compare. And feeling it, the boiler and the tanks, the cab, all of that stuff, it's all just made of plastic. It's only the chassis, presumably, and also the running plate, certainly, that is die-cast. The running plate, though, is a very thick, chunky piece, and no doubt that contributes quite a lot to the weight of the loco. But yeah, look at that. What a beautifully detailed model this is. What a gorgeous livery as well. Again, it's just a simple BR Black, but with that red lining on the boiler and the sort of cream and red lining on the tanks and running plate, it just brings it to life so much more. So, a little bit of background on the Class 5 in real life, and then we'll have a much closer look at this loco and its level of detail. The L&YR Class 5 tank engine was introduced in 1889 to the design of John Aspinall. The design was intended for local passenger work, and 310 were built in total between 1889 and 1911. Aspinall wasn't keen on the 044 design of tank engine because he thought that that unguided set of leading wheels could give rise to excessive wear on the wheels. Despite many 044 designs being perfectly okay, the Class 5 was born with its unusual 242 wheel configuration, which had non-driven guiding wheels at either end of the loco for guiding the loco around curves regardless of the direction of travel. The design also featured dual inside cylinders, joy valve gear initially, and then later batches featured superheating and Belpaire fireboxes, which produced a more powerful version of the class. From 1923, the locomotives passed into LMS ownership, where they were classified as a 2P. Withdrawal of the entire class had occurred by 1961, and only one example remains under preservation today, and it's 1008, which is the first one to be built. Although Disney used replicas of these locos on a railway at one of their theme parks. So there she is, Bachmann's L&YR Class 5 up close and personal for you, and this loco is amazing, and I really wasn't expecting it to be. I guess subconsciously I thought because this model has been around for a good few years now, it's not going to be as good as some of Bachmann's latest releases. Their latest stuff will be better quality, it'll have more detail, etc. The fact that that's not true, the fact that this model matches Bachmann's new releases in terms of detail and quality, and in some ways it even exceeds them, was a real surprise. But yes, this is a wonderful model. The quality is incredible. It weighs a lot. It comes in at 254 grams, which is the same as the red LMS/L&YR one that I've got. which is very, very heavy for a loco of this size. That's the same as the Bachmann C-Class with its tender. That's something, isn't it? And it's actually more than a Hornby 72XX tank engine, which is Britain's largest tank engine. The weight of this is incredible. It does, of course, look very different from the red version of this model that I've got, but looking up close, it's actually not that different in terms of the tooling variations. There's actually only a small handful of differences. I mean, the safety valves are a little bit different, of course. The front of the smoke box is a little different. We've got your traditional handle and just the running number on the older version, and then on the BR version you've got a more modern looking number board with the shed code and a different handrail and a lamp bracket on there. I can't really see very many other physical differences though. Besides those that I've just mentioned, it really is just the livery. And I hate to say this, and I never thought I would say it, but I think this lined BR Black version is actually nicer looking, in my opinion, than the LMS version. I just think it's got more lining to it. There is more complexity to this livery, that's for sure. And it just looks smarter in the black. So let's take a closer look at the banding on the boiler. This is genuinely faultless. It looks fantastic. You've got the British Railways lettering on the tanks with the cream, grey and red lining, very, very complex, all done excellently. The power classification and the running number where there's yet more lining. You've got the builder's plate on the side of the smoke box, which is faultlessly printed, and then the lining on the running plate follows the sort of contours of the running plate, which looks excellent. There's one little blip in the decoration over on the other side, which doesn't look quite as good, but that's the only issue I could speak of, really. So let's take a look at some of the various details. We'll start at the bottom around the wheels for a change. Yep, decent looking cast wheels which have been chemically blackened, and the centres have been covered up as well, which is great. You've also got sanding pipes and brake rigging pre-fitted to this model, which also saves you a job. The steps here on the running plate are made of metal, so those are really sturdy and high quality. Here's a look at the buffer beams, which do have the vacuum pipes pre-fitted to them, so again that saves you a job. And bear in mind you've also got the screw link couplings to fit here as well, which is a fantastic feature. Always love it when locos include those. The buffers are very fine and realistic, yet also sprung, made of metal too. Look at that, yep, sprung buffers. You've got separately fitted lamp brackets on the running plate, which are all nice and straight. Those are both at the front and at the back. The running plate itself has a ton of detail on it, loads of riveting moulded into it, looks absolutely wonderful. You've got the suspension springs here for the leading axles, very fine piece there, and you've even got a representation of the valve gear underneath the boiler, which is fully detailed. Look at that. You've got what looks like a little reverser rod here, separately fitted in front of the tanks, separately fitted wire handrails, which are also very fine. Full detail on top of the tanks with also separately fitted parts here as well. Absolutely amazing level of detail. The dome and the chimney look very finessed, and the way they join to the body is subtle. There is a little gap around the dome here, but we've seen more ungainly gaps on more recent models. The safety valves are incredibly fine and made of metal, and they're unpainted and polished as well so that they shine. They look marvellous, and the same is true of the whistle, a real metal whistle. What an incredibly high quality feature that is. The front facing cab windows have these painted frames around them, which are very, very precise. I like that a lot. And the rear facing windows are a little different. Well, the frames are a little different, but they still look great. The cab detail is wonderful. You've got lots of pipe work picked out. The water gauges are fully painted. Look at that. Separately fitted reverser wheel and such. It's an incredibly detailed cab. It's quite an enclosed one, yet so much of the detail has been picked out. It's really quite tremendous. You've got the handrails on the entrance to the cab, which I think may be just a part of the moulding, but they're done very, very well, and of course they do stand out. The coal bunker has this guard around the top, which is a sort of real guard in that you can see through the gaps. The individual bars are not just sort of moulded into a block. Yeah, it's a very realistic bunker there, and the coal load looks great as well. Might even be a die-cast coal load there. Yeah, it looks really, really excellent. And then around the back, you've got more lamp brackets, lots and lots of riveting on this body, and a similarly detailed buffer beam, below which we have the NEM couplings, which are just lightly sprung and pre-fitted, so the loco is literally ready to go straight out of the box. It's just such a good quality model, isn't it? The weight, the metal running plate, the way that all of the detail has been fitted nice and straightly with no visible glue, the very, very crisp decoration with literally one single issue across the entire loco. All of these things come together to make this a very impressive model. And then tying that in with the price, I mean, the RRP is only £150 for this at the absolute most. And if you think most retailers will knock this down 15% or something, so really you could get this for £127, something like that, if it's not on special. I think even at that price, this is a very, very reasonable buy. For me though, I managed to find this at the Model Centre for £97.96, so like I say, below £100. I think I got a good deal there. That is a bargain for what you get here. So a marvellous loco. Yes, it's a few years old, but don't let that fool you like it fooled me. This model is very much up to modern standards, and like I say, in terms of quality, I think it exceeds modern standards, because it's rare to find a loco as pristine and perfect as this one is. I really do love it. Okay. So let's get this down onto the track. Let's take a look at the mechanism. Let's see what the quality of that is like. And then of course we'll get this running. We'll see how it crawls. We'll see how it runs at higher speeds. And we'll also test its pulling power. Let's get started. So there she is, the beautiful L&YR Class 5 tank down onto the track, and I have already filmed the first performance test, and I will reveal how that went in just a second, although I will just give you a little teaser and say it did not go very well, unfortunately, which I'm gutted about, because obviously this loco is just gorgeous, but alas, that's what happened. After that though, I did a much needed disassembly, which again, I'll give you a little hint about what happened. Did include some servicing, but I won't talk about that right now. Let's just talk about the actual mechanism. First of all, I mean, look at the wheel configuration. You've got the drivers in the center here, and then you've got the non-drivers on the outside, and that's a problematic design, because obviously if the non-drivers have too much weight on them, they will take weight off the drivers, and the loco's ability to haul anything will be completely throttled. But if they are too light, if they're not sprung enough, they'll flap off the track and the thing will derail. So these are quite heavily sprung, and the springing is really quite heavy here. It's more heavy, in fact, than on my other L&YR Class 5, which is quite interesting. As you can see though, as I lift these up, the loco itself isn't lifting up too much, which means the springing isn't so hard that the loco is actually supported by these axles. They're just sprung to the track. So we'll see how that works. Now, in terms of pickups, I can see the wiper pickups on the loco wheels, but I can't see any on the non-driven wheels. Yet, when I put power to them, half of the non-driven wheels actually do pick up power, although the other one, as you can see, is quite intermittent. I have to push it right down to get power to that wheel. So, to find out what's going on, I decided to remove the base keeper plate, which was where things started to get annoying. It's a very irritating design with the base keeper plate, because it's hardwired, so you can't pull it away to service the pickups or oil the axles or anything like that. And also loads of bits started dropping out. The guard irons came out because they're not glued in. The non-driven wheel assemblies were falling apart, and they're even harder to put back in because obviously you've got the hardwired base keeper plate. You've also got to keep them in place as you get the keeper plate back into position, and you've also got to put the guard irons back in. Any number of these parts can come out of position as you're trying to screw the base keeper back on, and you've got to start again. It's just a really quite annoying design. You can see how the sprung non-driven wheel assemblies work though. As you can see, you've got this spring and a little sort of bearing type thing in the center, and that's what pushes the axle down onto the track. And then either side of that, you've got those little pickups on the axle itself, and that takes power to the base keeper plate where it's connected to the motor and such. This does mean though that yes, only one wheel per non-driven axle does pick up power, and it also means that these axles are polarized. So if they do come out, if you take them out for whatever reason, you have to put them back in the right way, otherwise you'll get a short. And you can tell which is the right way because there's a little tiny insulator on the axle, and the side with that insulator is the side that does not pick up power on that axle. As you can tell, it's rather complicated, I would say. Anyway, you can see that there are proper bearings on the axles and only one axle is driven, so it's nice and simple, nothing too overcomplicated going on here. Now, to remove the body, I put back some of the screws that held the base keeper on, and then I left out the 3 screws shown on the instructions for body removal, and this revealed, when I pulled it out, a quite bare-bones chassis with no lights or speakers on it, so yeah, it's a little bit dated in that sense, and it also only has a 3-pole motor without a flywheel, which is quite disappointing. This is a large model, there would have been room for a flywheel, and you do kind of expect a better quality motor than that these days. And here is the 6-pin DCC decoder, which is located in the coal bunker, and there's not very much room here. I think you'd get a decoder in there, but you might struggle with a speaker. So yeah, not really designed with sound in mind, although I'm sure it would be possible with some of the smaller speakers. And then for the gauge, it comes in at 14.2 to 14.3 quite reliably, which is just below the standard, not too bad. So the mechanism, not very serviceable, quite a pain to take apart, and as you'll hear later on, it was necessary to take this apart due to the way this loco performed. So with that, let's move on to the performance section, and I'll show you how that went. Okay, moment of truth then. Does this loco work? And I'm going to be quite upset if it doesn't, because it's beautiful. So let's see if its performance matches its excellent looks, shall we? Forwards direction. Does the loco run? Here we go. It inched forward and then stopped. I thought that would do it. Okay. Okay, it's off. Now, obviously, this hasn't been running yet, and I don't know how long this has been in stock for before I bought it, so you know, maybe there will be some scope for improvement here, but it seems to be sort of coming to life already, doesn't it? And it's only been running for a matter of seconds. So yeah, I'm hoping everything will be okay. I think if it is dry as a bone when I look at the mechanism, I might consider giving it a little bit of oil. But obviously I'll do that after I've thoroughly checked over the performance, just so that I can get a sense of how this loco runs straight out of the box. So that it is consistent with my other reviews. But yeah, certainly things seem to have improved quite a bit now. Let's run past the camera at 50% speed. Yeah, it's certainly geared well, isn't it? Unless, of course, whatever sort of issue this has is causing it to run slower than it would normally. Again, that will be clearer after it's running, I suppose, and after it's had a bit of lubrication, if that's what it needs. But I would say now, after that initial sort of blip, it does seem to be running very nicely. It's consistent, it's not too loud, although I'd say it's slightly noisier than some, but yeah, no issues really with that. And it's not cutting out on the dead zone of the point, which is here, so it seems like the pickups are okay as well. So yeah, that's all good. What's the crawl like, first of all? Obviously, I will test this again before giving a final judgment on this, but I do like to see how they run straight out of the box. So backwards to start with. The crawl's excellent. Very good indeed. Let's try it in forwards. Yeah, pretty fantastic, isn't it, that? Yeah, that's looking really good. Okay, now, torque test. Let's see what this is like. Forwards, 50% then. Let's see if it can push against my finger. Yeah, seems to be having a little bit of trouble with that, but it is able to turn its wheels. So, yeah, I would say with a good run-in, this loco could be an excellent performer, but I think we need to do that before I make any final decision on this. So, forwards then, 50%. Let's see how it gets on around the track. Here goes. Okay, so it's a tricky wheel configuration. How's it going to run? Oh, not very well. Has it just cut out, or is it struggling on the curve? Don't think my old one did that. Come on, love, let's go. Yeah, it's just cutting out, I think, isn't it? Okay, so certainly struggling. Yeah, struggling to run smoothly and consistently. That might improve as the loco runs in. It might need pickup adjustment / lubrication before this works. But at the end of the day, if you buy a loco in brand new condition, it should work well. If it's been sat on the shelf for a long time and doesn't run well, that's not the customer's problem. It is up to the retailer to supply customers with fully working models. So we'll have to see how this one goes. I suspect it will improve as it runs in, but only time will tell. So I'll leave this to run 30 minutes forwards, 30 minutes backwards. I am having to keep poking it on curves to make it go. So some sort of adjustment may be necessary. We'll see how I get on. Don't go anywhere. I'll see you when the job's done. Right, running in is complete. And there's good news and bad news, shall we say. The bad news is that that was a disaster, a real disaster. In fact, most of the clips you've just seen of this thing running were after I took it apart to repair it, because I literally could not film it as it was out of the box. After the couple of laps this loco did during my voiceover for the previous section, something went badly wrong. It started to slow down really dramatically on the curves, and then there was some issue with, I think it was this rear axle here, it started to derail on some of the tighter curves as well. Now, I know some people would be tempted to blame my setup for that. Obviously, yeah, my track's on the carpet, it's not ideal, but I've got another one of these tank engines and that does not have these issues, so I kind of knew that there was something wrong with this. And I think there are two issues at play here. The first one is, I'm going to go ahead and say, the retailer I bought this from, Model Railways Direct. Now, they've not faffed around with the model or sabotaged it in any way. No, I'm not saying that, but I will say I think they've had this loco in stock for a bit too long. Looking online and looking at the box, this loco was produced in 2016, which makes this model 7 years old. Now, I did not know that when I bought this loco as new. So ultimately, I think this has just been in stock for a bit too long. All of the bearings had dried out and it was a terrible runner, as you saw when I first ran it. Now, maybe that's a little bit unfair. I don't know how long this had been reduced for. Maybe this has been at £100 or less for years and they just didn't sell it until I came along. That's possible. So if that's true, I apologise. And also, maybe Model Railways Direct haven't had this model for 7 years. Maybe they bought it from another retailer that couldn't shift it or whatever. Maybe they haven't had this for all that long. But at the end of the day, they sold me a 7-year-old model and I didn't know that was the case and it ran badly. So I had to take this apart, as I mentioned earlier on. I gave it a bit of oil on all of its axles. The pickups were not adjusted correctly. As you can see, yeah, they're breaking contact with the wheels, which explains why it was having trouble on curves. So I readjusted those and gave them a little bit of a clean as well. As for the axles though, that were derailing, don't think I can blame the retailer for that. I'm going to say that that one is a Bachmann issue. Now, like I said earlier on, my other L&YR Class 5 tank does not derail or have any issues with its non-driven axles. And you might also remember that I said the springing on the axles on this loco doesn't seem to be as powerful as the springing on these. Yeah, these axles are pushed quite harshly down onto the track. And the way to sort of prove that there's a difference here was to measure the pulling power. So I did that. The pulling power of this loco was 0.28 newtons. The pulling power of my maroon L&YR Class 5 was 0.34 newtons, so that one was considerably more powerful. And that means that more weight on this loco is being taken by the non-driven axles and leaving less for the driving wheels. So yeah, I don't know what the difference is, but there's something different about this one that produces less pulling power and the derailments. I have managed to fix it though, and this is the confusing part. I don't know how I managed to fix it. I took it apart many times. I tried it without the springs in there. I thought maybe that would help it. I can just use the pickup springs to push the wheels onto the track. No, that made it worse. The mainspring is definitely needed. I tried adjusting the pickup springs to make sure there wasn't sort of uneven loading on the axles. That didn't seem to matter. I took it apart one third and final time just to see what the issue was, couldn't find anything, put it back together that time and the derailing stopped. It stopped slowing down on curves, it seems stable as anything. So it's really annoying because I have no idea what the issue was. I can't tell you what to do to fix it because I'm not too sure exactly what it was that fixed it in the end. But it does seem to be quite dodgy, doesn't it? So a bit disappointing on performance. I have, though, been able to run it in without issue. It was very miserable. I had to disassemble this completely and oil and lubricate it and troubleshoot the axles. And because of the way this is designed, that's not very easy to do. So it's got a bit of an Achilles heel, this loco. But yeah, it's working now. It's not cutting out. It's not derailing. So at long last, I am happy. But it wasn't the smooth experience that it normally is buying a loco. I guess that's reflected in the price, but I don't know. I feel like this should have been reduced in price sooner than it was and sold years ago because, yeah, just issues have developed in this, which have been a bit of a pain to fix. But like you can see, it's fairly smooth now. Certainly a lot quieter now that it's had some lubrication. I don't know if you can tell, but yeah, it has quietened down. And let's also see what the crawl is like now that it's running. Quite surprised that it crawled as well as it did with just a 3-pole motor, although it's got no flywheel, so the load on the motor shaft isn't very great. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? So, you know, I prefer 5-pole motors, and Bachmann do have a high quality 5-pole motor in their arsenal, but you can't deny that this one runs pretty well. I mean, it's cut out now, but forget that then. No, it was good. It was a good crawl. You know, as this runs in more, it might improve. No, it's struggling, isn't it? And I have adjusted the pickups now, so I'm confident that it's running at its best. But when it does maintain continuity, you can see that it is crawling very, very slowly. See if we can speed it up a bit. Yeah. So it's not dreadfully smooth at that speed. It's sort of speeding up and slowing down, and it has been run in now, so it's not like I can say hopefully this will improve as it runs in. I mean, it's pretty much as good as it's going to be, isn't it? It's fully run in. So yeah, the performance isn't amazing. But on the other hand, it was very cheap, and it is an odd wheel configuration, which, you know, is quite unique and challenging, I assume. So yeah, I mean, it's okay. I've obviously got much better runners than this, but it does seem to be reasonably okay now with no major issues remaining. So pulling power, like I said, 0.28 newtons. That should be around 19 coaches on straight and level track. So it's not a powerhouse or anything, but actually, given the era of this loco, that pulling power is probably adequate. So in the interests of not overloading this quite poorly loco, I've just hooked up 3 coaches to this, which seems like a reasonable sort of load for a 2P loco. So with that, let's go and couple, and let's check whether the couplings are functional. Here we go. Yeah, really not too smooth in reverse there. It's sort of speeding up and slowing down, possibly due to the lack of flywheel, thinking about it. Anyway, I don't know why I did that. I've just straightened up the coupling hooks, which is a bit naughty because it's helping the loco, isn't it? But looking at it, the couplings are perfectly at the right height, and Bachmann are not a culprit for dodgy couplings usually. So yeah, I'm happy to give that a pass. Couplings are fine. Let's start the loco. Here we go. Let's go for about 40 speed. That seems reasonable. Okay, so on the middle line, I'm also going to run this at 40 speed, is my other L&YR Class 5. Let's go a bit faster just to get it into shot. I'll have to say, I think this is the better runner. It seems to be a little bit speedier, perhaps, and obviously it has better pulling power. Now, obviously there are differences here. I've already mentioned the difference in the springing of those non-driven wheels. Also, this hasn't spent 7 years sitting in its box. I've been running it. I've also serviced it a good few times, made sure it's in tip-top condition. So yeah, it could be due to the fact that this has been running and the other one's just been sat abandoned in its box. The springing issue though is different. Obviously that's not going to change just because a loco's been in its box for longer. I'm trying to remember whether I did have issues with this originally and I've maybe modified the front and back axles. That is possible, but I don't remember. I'm pretty sure not. I think I would remember if I'd had a lot of problems with it. I might take this one apart one day and see if there's any difference, but I really don't want to do that because they are a real pain to disassemble. Anyway, off it goes. Enough about that, because it is problem solved for now. Seems to be a slightly speedier runner though, yeah. And then on the inside line, we've got the Johnson 1P from the Midland Railway, which is a similar sort of loco, as you will see. But this was produced by Bachmann more recently, and it's much better mechanically, it's less fussy mechanically. It's got a coreless motor in it, which is obviously a much better performing motor. Far less issues with that. Alright, let's see how it gets on. As you can see, it's not struggling now, it's not cutting out. Yep. I would say it did slow down a little around that curve, but not too dramatically. And now that it's on the straight again, it is hauling the coaches alright. So I would say that yes, now the performance does seem to be okay. Obviously, I have disassembled this locomotive and I have made some modifications to it. I've added some lubricant, I've adjusted the pickups, which I know in previous reviews I've said is something I don't like to do during reviews. And it's true, I don't like to do that. I like to be consistent in my reviews. I like to treat every model in exactly the same way. But on this occasion, I did make an exception, because when I learned that this model had been sat in its box for 7 years and I saw the issues with the performance, and I couldn't get the loco to do laps without stopping and derailing, which was preventing me from filming the loco, I decided, do you know what, I'm going to have to do something here. Otherwise, this is going to take me all day. I'm going to get really angry with it, and I'm not going to be able to get a good idea of what this loco is capable of. So if this had been a new release, I think I would have reviewed it as is. I would have said it's a terrible runner. I think given the special circumstances in this case, what I did is reasonable. But do bear in mind, the performance that you're seeing here is not as it was out of the box, as is usually the case with my reviews. This is as it is now that I've serviced and improved the loco in a couple of areas. But yeah, it's okay. It has disappointed me because the loco was so gorgeous when it came out of the box. I was so impressed with it. I thought it looked fantastic. And then I got it onto the track and it was a dog. And I've spent the last hour and a half or so trying to fix the issues and troubleshoot them, which has taken away some of the pleasure, I would say. Now that it's working nicely though, I think provided that remains the case, that annoyance should fade away and I should be able to enjoy the model from now on. And yeah, fingers crossed that that is the case. If it isn't, I will let you know in a future video. But yeah, for now I can enjoy it as the beautiful model that it is. It's looking great and running pretty decently now as well, which is good. Let's do some ratings then for the L&YR Class 5 tank from Bachmann. And as you can see, yeah, kind of mixed reviews here. There are aspects of the model which are fantastic, such as the appearance and the level of detail and the quality, and there are other aspects that are not quite so good, such as the performance. Some of that may not be Bachmann's fault. Like I say, the retailer in this case sold me quite an old model, even though I didn't know that that was the case at the time. And so some of it could be age related, but there's not a lot I can do about that, unfortunately. I have to review the model that I get as per my rules and as per my standards. So let's look at this. The level of detail I've given 4.5 because it is a truly fantastic model this time. The decoration is marvellous, really, really great decoration. Lots of detail on this, such as sprung buffers, screw link couplings included, detailed valve gear between the frames, metal safety valves and whistle. Really good high quality detail, which has all been very well applied. I've knocked it down by half a star because of course some models do have lights these days. This one does not, and obviously I can't give this full marks because then the models with lights don't get that recognised on their ratings. The performance though is a 3-star for me. Now of course I would say the loco is more deserving of a 4 or even 5-star performance, but of course I've dismantled the whole thing and repaired it. Out of the box it was a 3-star at most. There were issues with it cutting out, badly adjusted pickups, not enough lubrication on the mechanism. Again, that could have been due to how long it was sat in its box for. But then you've got the non-driven wheels derailing on curves and such, and that's not right. Now though, it seems to be okay. It's nice and smooth, the crawl is good, the torque is decent as well. The pulling power is 19 coaches or 0.28 newtons. Again though, due to how much extra springing there is on those non-driven axles, that is less than the other Class 5 I have, even though the weights of the two are the same. So it's okay, I think it will haul exactly what you want it to. Reasonable prototypical loads should be fine, but it's not as good as it could have been. The mechanism is a bit of a letdown for me. It's got plenty of pickups on it, that seems to be okay, but it's not very serviceable because the base keeper plate is hardwired and all of those bits and pieces come pinging out of there if you take it off to clean the pickups or lubricate the axles, as I absolutely had to on this occasion due to how badly it was running. It's also just got a 3-pole motor without a flywheel, and I am going to deduct points for the dodgy non-driven wheels here under the mechanism section. So it's a middle of the road 2.5 star. It does however have proper bearings on the driving axles and a nice simple gear train that is not over-engineered. The quality though is 5 star for me, so incredibly well put together. It's a very heavy model with lots of die cast on it, very nicely decorated with only one minor issue in the decoration. It's so minor, in fact I've not knocked it down on the quality. Yeah, it's a truly high quality model. That brings us on to the value then, which is pretty good. I think it's a bit pricey at £149.95, which does sound about typical for a modern loco these days, but of course this one doesn't have any lighting or the pre-fitted speaker. It's a little bit light on features where that's concerned, so I would give that about a 3 star, quite pricey. The price I paid though, £97.96 from Model Railways Direct, a bargain. That would be 5 star for me, so I've split the difference and given it 4 star. Overall then, that is a grade of 7.70 out of 10, which is a grade C, but it's very close to a B, not far off at all. If it ran better out of the box, it would have been a B or even an A. Into the logbook we go, where it is 14th place above the Hunslet 16-inch from Rapido and below the Sonic Models A5. Well, annoying as this has been at times, it's certainly been an interesting one. Lots of twists and turns in this review, and it's very interesting about the differences between my old L&YR Class 5 and this one. The springing in those non-driven wheels being different, that's unusual. Do you think Bachmann changed the design? Do you think it's just down to variation in the manufacturing process? Do you think there was a fault on this black one? I don't know, I really don't know. Is it just age? Has mine run a lot? Have the springs become less springy with time? But then why didn't my red Class 5 derail all the time when it was new? Because I don't remember it doing. Yeah, it's a very strange one. If you've got any idea, if you know better than I do, please do let me know. But at the end of the day, you know what, if you know what you're doing with locos, this is a perfectly recommendable loco. And at the same time, if Bachmann were to bring this back at a reasonable price, a new batch, freshly produced, not 7 years old, then yeah, I can totally recommend it. Otherwise though, if you see one of these for sale at a low price, look up the product code online, see when that model was produced, see what year it was in the catalogue, and if it's a long time ago, just bear in mind that the loco may need some attention in order to run well. I think with other models it's not that important. Perhaps if they've got slightly better mechanisms, if they've got more pickups, then they'll sort themselves out as they run. But this loco does have fewer pickups due to its wheel configuration, and that meant that this was just struggling too much to get by without some assistance initially. It's tricky. I don't want to blame the retailer too much because, you know, if a model doesn't sell, that's not exactly the retailer's fault. They don't set the prices, and you can't expect them to throw a model in the bin once it reaches 5 years old. But at the end of the day, you know, it's not the customer's fault either when they buy a model as new and it doesn't work properly because it's been sat on the shelf for a long time. So I don't think it's a case of pointing the finger and saying, you're to blame, I'm to blame, this, that and the other. I think it's just an unfortunate situation, and there's a few ways out of it. You can return a model, get your money back, maybe try a replacement, or you can fix it yourself if you can. If you know what you're doing, that makes sense. If you don't, you know, you could lose a lot of money if you make a mistake and then they won't take it back because you've faffed around with it. So yeah, just act smart, make the right decisions, think about things carefully before you do things, and you should be okay. For now though, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very, very soon with another review. Alright folks, you take care.